Hello, my glorious lot, and welcome back to my vintage story. I was still waiting for a ram to get in here, only it wasn't very forthcoming. But look at this landscape. It was absolutely gorgeous. Every blade of grass, every leaf, every tree was glistening with winter. It was so cold though. It was 8th of December and it was -7 degrees. But somehow I was managing to stay warm. I needed some shears. I was fed up of tapping each branch for some sticks. And I was told that shears were the way to go if I wanted it to be a quicker process. So I thought I'd get some more copper on the heat and make myself some. As you know, I had quite a bit of copper and I had become quite familiar with the whole process. I seemed to feel like I knew what I was doing. So that was quite good. But as they say, you know, practice makes, well, not always perfect, but it certainly makes you better. But I was never patient enough to wait for it to smelt, and I always ended up re-smelting it. And on this occasion, once I'd got the charcoal in, I went off to get myself a little bit of wood. I still had so much to do around the place and so many plans that I wanted to complete. But you couldn't rush things around here. Everything took its own time. But every time I went out, I headed for the pit to see if my ewe had gotten herself a little mate. But alas, she was still there by herself, and she'd eaten all the grain and had not got any more grain to put in the troughs. So I did have a thought that she might be there all winter by herself until the spring, when I could grow some more. But you never know. Some lucky chappie might just fall in, and there you are. That's how things happen, isn't it? Anyway, my thoughts were going back to chests and more storage. I did spot a lonesome pine tree, so I went off to chop it down, keeping my eye, as ever, on my surroundings, because you never know what might creep up on you. There wasn't too many branches, so it didn't take that long to fell it. And as time went on, I was collecting more and more stuff, and it was imperative that I had more and more space. And chests were the next thing on the agenda. And they were much quicker and simpler to make than the storage vessels. I didn't have to nap them or fire them. I did wonder whether she would survive over the winter without any food. But after a conversation with I was assured that the food was just to make them breed, and that although her weight would shift, she would survive without some grain over the winter. Another thing I could have done much earlier was actually upgrade my backpacks. The leather backpacks gave you 6 storage slots each. That means I'd have 24 if I changed them all. But you did need a lot of leather, and there was quite a long process for tanning them. But the hunter's backpack, which gave you 4 storage slots, you made with pelts. And if you remember, making pelts was quite easy. You just combined hide with fat. And if you had medium or large pelts, you only needed 1 and surrounded them with cattails or papyrus. But I'd never seen any papyrus around here. Or the smaller pelts, you needed 3 and surrounded them with cattails. Well, Orr had already made his leather backpacks, so he had a couple of spare hunter's backpacks that he could give me, so I only needed to make 2. Awesome. So I combined 2 medium hide with 2 fat, and so over time they could cure and turn themselves into pelts that I could use to make my hunter's backpacks. The garden wasn't looking its best, but then I hadn't really got to grips with how to plant things, where to plant things and when to plant things, and it's something I really needed to get into. The different crops needed different nutrients in the soil, so you had to be careful if there was enough potassium or nitrate or phosphorus, and other plants were very much dependent on the temperature, so you had to be careful what you planted, where you planted it and when you planted it. So I needed to do a bit of research about that. and a lot of the things that I'd got in my garden at this stage were killed off by the cold. But I did get the seeds back when I harvested them. So I decided to harvest everything and replant when I knew what I was doing in the spring. It wasn't long before Orr came by to bring me the 2 backpacks he said I could have. I was getting quite excited at having extra inventory space. It was everything. And he also brought me some extra hides. That was fab. He dug a pit near where he was growing his crops, and rabbits kept falling in it trying to get to the crops. I'd have to do that in the spring. I wasted no time at all in changing my little baskets for the hunter's backpacks that Orr had brought me. And it was quite obvious I didn't really understand how these things worked, because trying to get rid of the basket out of my inventory was a little bit of a problem. It didn't seem to want to go anywhere. I ended up chucking them all out because they were getting on my nerves. And once I'd got rid of them, I could pick up my hunter's backpacks. My 2 hides hadn't cured though, so I did need 2 of the baskets back in. But they popped back into my inventory quite easily. And I didn't understand that because they weren't doing that earlier. So I chucked them out again, not realising that I could have recycled those. Another type of sack I could have made was a linen sack. And for this, though, you needed a lot of flax, and I hadn't grown any flax at all. So flax was quite important because you could make quite a few things, including clothes and poultices for healing and linen. So I came to realise that flax was an early game must. All the smithing I was doing wore down my hammer quite quickly, so I needed to make another one. And I thought while I was smelting, I might as well make a prospecting pick, because I hoped I would soon be doing some prospecting. And I was always getting hungry. And at last, I got around to making some shears. And there we have it, and I thought they looked quite snazzy. So I wasted no time in going out and trying them out. Now then, I was getting a little bit better going out at night time. I did make sure that the rift activity was calm though, and made sure I had some light with me, and made sure I didn't really go very far. So I thought I'd nab this little tree that was in between mine and Floozer's place. It wouldn't take long, and I would replace it because I couldn't remember whether Flooz had planted it or not. So off I went to test my shears. Oh, and boy were those quick. Oh yes, I think I'd always have shears in my inventory. And being able to walk across the snow to this little island without getting wet and without dousing my torch got me thinking again about building a bridge. So I thought once I'd finished getting this tree, I might just have a go at building that bridge. I thought I'd anchor the bridge with brick, blue clay brick. I hadn't used this before, mostly because it was quite modern looking, but I thought I'd try it for the bridge. And then I was going to use the stone path blocks for the pathing across the bridge. And my bridge was going to be arched so that you could go underneath it if you needed to. But I soon found out that really wasn't going to work with these stone path slabs because they didn't sit on top of each other. So I had to have a bit of a rethink. And I tried again, this time with mud bricks. But frustratingly, the same thing happened with mud bricks as well. The slabs didn't sit on top of each other. So I had to have another rethink. So while I was thinking about that, I thought I'd get on with expanding my storage system. And I needed a fair amount of wood for that. In fact, I was thinking I might need an awful lot of wood, because I was beginning to think that wood might be the way to go for the bridge as well. So I made quite a lot of pine boards, because there was quite a few things I wanted to make from this wood. I'd got me sticks, I'd got me boards, and I could make a sign. Well, I made a few signs actually, because I had quite a few things I wanted signs for. And one of the first things I did was to label my little hovel so that everybody knew whose it was. And thought about one day building a grand house, one that would be worthy of a sign outside of it, but for now it would have to be just my hovel. I was quite chuffed with that. So I got on with the chests. I was just going to make a couple, but then I thought, no, I'll need more than that, so I made a whole stack. I had deliberated a little bit over what I was going to put in the chests. Could I put food in them? I wasn't quite sure how food would store in chests. So to start with, I decided to stick with things like wood and stone and the like. And when I got round to expanding my cellar, I could experiment a little bit and see if it was worth storing food in them. So as I had wood in my inventory, I thought I'd make my first chest for wood stuff. I might need more than one though, because there was a lot of wood stuff to be had. But when I opened it up, I thought, wow. And you could make double chests, so you'd get twice as much storage. So it wasn't long before I did quite a few chests, labelled them all and started putting things in them. And it was nice to start getting organised on a bigger scale. I did notice a massive rift right outside my house. And it was soon obvious that I hadn't got enough light in my room. This was a scary situation. And lucky for me, these weren't the really bad drifters. These were just surface drifters that had a health of 12. And with a few slashes with my sword, I was able to bring them under control relatively easily. I really had no idea that they could spawn right there in the same room. So with plenty more light on the situation, I harvested them just in case they might provide me with a little treat or two, but alas, they had nothing to offer me. But I definitely needed more permanent light. I was able to sleep the rest of the night away, and as the night nibbled away at my food, I noticed that it didn't heal you if you slept during the night. And I would have thought that that would have been a thing, because if you're resting, you're healing, aren't you? But nevertheless, the morning came. Although it was quite early, it was still dark outside. But it was just after 5, so it would lighten up pretty quickly. And that rift was still there. It could have been so much worse with a deep, a tainted or a corrupted drifter. So my very next thing was looking at what I needed for a copper lantern. So I needed some clear quartz, I needed a candle and copper plates. Actually, you needed 2 copper plates. I did think that was quite expensive, but I suppose they did last forever. And with a light level of 18 and drifters spawning in anything less than a 9, it would guarantee that I wouldn't get any more drifters spawning in my room. Another terrifying thought whilst fighting those drifters was the thought of ending up back in the forest if I died. And Or helped me out again with that by giving me a temporal gear. He'd been able to get hold of a few of them by harvesting dead drifters. The safest spot in my house, I thought, was in my cellar. So I used the temporal gear to reset my spawn. So if I died, that's exactly where I would respawn. And all of a sudden, dying didn't seem all that terrifying. I would still want to go and find my stuff though. It wouldn't take care of that. But I did feel much safer. And once those 2 hides had cured, I was able to make 2 more backpacks, which would give me 2 more inventory slots. So I just needed some cattails, and once I'd put the pelts in my inventory slot and surrounded it with the cattails, I had 2 more hunter's backpacks. I chucked out my other baskets, because of course from earlier you'll know I was having trouble with them. And it turns out that if you take a backpack out of those 4 special slots on the right hand side, they may still have inventory items in them. I didn't know that. So that's why you couldn't put them in your ordinary inventory, because if they had inventory in them, you could only put them in those 4 special slots. So what I had to do was to empty my inventory before I took a basket or a backpack out of that slot. Then I could put it down or put it in my inventory without losing any of my stuff. So at last I understood how those 4 right-hand slots worked. I had thought I was going a bit crackers when I found some of my inventory items missing. And a bonus was that you could recycle the baskets and get some of those cattails back. I wish I'd known that earlier. I wasted 2 of mine. One night, a little while later, I found I was shivering while I was doing some nighttime napping. And when I looked at my temperature, it was at 33.4 degrees and dropping. I mean, it was -15 outside, but I hadn't gotten cold before. All my physical attributes seemed to be okay except for my temperature. And I had food in my belly. But it might have been that I needed warmer clothes, or more of them. But the simple fact was, I was cold and getting colder. In fact, I was freezing. So I thought I'd light a fire and see if standing next to it would raise my temperature. So having replaced my torches, I went down into the cellar and lit a fire. And on consulting the wiki, it seems that if your temperature is 4 degrees less than it should be, which is 37 degrees, for more than 3 in-game hours straight, you'll actually start freezing. And ways to prevent that from happening is to wear warm clothes, and keeping them repaired of course, being in an enclosed room which would raise your body temperature by 1 degree, and having a fire pit to heat the room. Standing next to the fire was working nicely, and my temperature was going up. So I thought now was the time to be making my fireplace, so I could have a nice warm cosy fire during these very cold nights. So first thing I had to do was remove my ladders and resituate them a few blocks over to the left, because I'd decided that I'd like to have my fireplace just above where my ladders were. Remember that rule in block games like this of not mining right above your head? Well, same thing goes here, because you could end up with a table on your head, costing you about 4.5 health points. Ouch. And once I got over the shock, I placed my ladders right where the table had been. Stupid table. Now, unfortunately, the measurement of my room was in even numbers. That was a bit of a mistake, really, because there was no centre block. So I knocked out the 2 blocks astride my centre and decided to have my fireplace there. I didn't have a plan of what it was going to look like in the end. I just wanted a fireplace of sorts where I could build a fire pit to keep the room warm. I had some granite cobblestone, and I thought that in combination with the blue slate might look nice. So I thought I'd try the granite cobblestone on the outside and the blue slate on the inside to see what it would look like. And thinking about having an enclosed space that would help you keep warmer, I thought I'd make a little space for the smoke to go up, but then I would block it off so that there were no opening to make the room cold. However, the 2 block space for a fireplace just wouldn't work, because you could only put a fire pit on 1 block and not between the 2. What were I thinking of? So unfortunately, my fireplace had to be a little bit off-centre. And I played around a little bit with some of the shingles from the roof. I also messed about with the blue clay bricks as well, thinking I could sort of incorporate them somewhere in there. Maybe I just had too many different types of stone and brick together, because it wasn't looking very well at all. But I persisted in trying things out, because you never know when you hit upon something that wasn't successful. So I kept playing around with the shingles and the blue clay bricks and the cobblestone. I kept putting them in places and taking them out again, and then putting them back in a different way and taking them out again. I just couldn't hit on a combination that I liked. I liked the shingles, I liked the colour, and I liked the patterns on them. But my head kept insisting on putting the clay bricks in with them, but it just wasn't working. So in the end, I gave it up as a bad job and thought I'd spend some time on the outside with the chimney stack, because I just could not figure out how to make it look any better. I thought on the outside the blue clay brick suited the roof very well. I wasn't quite sure how high to put the chimney stack, but with the blue clay brick you also got the top of a chimney that you could fashion. I thought I might be able to fit two on, but actually it went in the middle. But that was okay, and I quite liked the way that looked. But at the bottom of the chimney stack, it looked a bit awkward, because I had to incorporate the blue shingle at the bottom to make any sense of it. And then I thought of the corner pieces. You can make different shapes with the shingles, so I made some corner pieces and wondered if they would fit nicely at the bottom of that chimney stack. I tried them out on the floor, and I quite like those. They were a little bit fiddly to place. They obviously had an orientation which you needed to get right, but if you were in the right position, they placed quite nicely. So with my two corners in place, it made me want to replace the stairs with the straight pieces of shingle roofing. And that went in lovely. So I did that on the other side. And then replaced the bit of the roof I'd taken off with some more shingle. And the only thing I didn't like was this bit of blue clay brick peeking through between the two. So I left the fireplace for a little while I thought about what I could do with it, and moved on to windows. Now I got my glass slabs in the windows that Ori had put in for me, and I quite liked those. But full blocks might make the room warmer. There were several recipes for making windows, some which involved crushing, grinding and smelting, but the simplest one was with quartz chunks and sticks. I would have to pan a lot more to get enough quartz to replace all my windows, but I was determined to chip away at that, and I started replacing them. I thought putting an actual fire in the fireplace might give me some inspiration about what else to do with it. So I did there, and stood there for a little while and looked at it. I really did not like those blue clay bricks. They would have to come out. But I still wasn't sure, when I'd taken them out, what to put in there. So I left that for a bit as well, and decided to chance my arm at getting a few of these little critters that were hidden in the snow. But with more and more practice, I was getting better. And those poor little bunnies that were surviving in the snow had to succumb to my copper-edged spears. And at this time of year, there wasn't a lot of weight on them, so you didn't get a lot when you harvested them. But still, one meat and one hide was better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And of course, keeping your hand in and practising, you could only get better. But you always had to have your eye on the environment and making sure that whatever you were doing, you were safe doing it. I wasn't desperate for this meat at this time, but I did want to keep on practising throughout the winter, and I wanted to preserve my resources. And it was gorgeous out in the snow on the lake. Why wouldn't I be doing this? And then I spotted something wrong with my chimney. I'd missed some cobble off this left-hand side. So I needed to rectify that immediately. And there was a stair on the other side. I don't know how that got there. So I put the cobble in, I removed the stair, and then I got an idea for the inside. Just came to me in a flash. I could use those corner pieces that I put on the roof here for like a canopy over the fire. And when I replaced the upside down stairs above it, it finished it off nicely. Yeah, I quite liked that. That worked quite well. And then after replacing some of the granite cobble on the floor with shingles, like a sort of a hearth, it sort of all came together. Yeah, that was it. I needed a little bit of decoration around it. It was looking a little bit plain now. What could I put there? I had a jug. That could go there. Had a look around. A watering can. Oh, it wouldn't go on that block with the jug. So I put it next to it at an angle. And then I moved the jug over a little bit. And that really worked. Yeah, I quite like that. And then Maddie appeared. And we'd been talking about how to keep warm in the winter. And she'd been working on some winter clothes. And she brought me some knee-high boots and a chateau blouse. So I was able to change my malefactor wrapped boots, which wasn't giving me any warmth at all, for the knee-high fur boots, which gave me an extra 3 degrees of warmth. And I was able to change my malefactor shirt for the chateau blouse, which gave me an extra 2.5 degrees of warmth. Nice one, Maddie. And I saw Orr going past, and he'd been working on some copper armour, and I went out to have a look. And wow, he did look snazzy. I like the look of that. But that's all I can fit into this episode. I did my chimney, and I did my fireplace, but I didn't get very far with my bridge. But I'd have to do that in the next episode. So take care, everybody, and I'll see you next week in the next episode. Bye-bye.